Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing a recent Supreme Court decision that found that police need a warrant if they want to get your IP address. And we've been talking about why we did not have a privacy interest in IP addresses until now, even though it can be used to identify you. And it's sort of required if you're going to be online. You will have an IP address if you go online in any way. So, Nadine, you were explaining why you think we didn't have this privacy interest until the court gave this decision and how this is an evolving area of law. I just wanted you to be able to finish your thought there.
Yeah, so I just think that this outcome was most likely in response to the disruptive innovation and technological developments that we've seen over the past decade, and especially since the pandemic. And so everyone in the legal profession was kind of forced to adapt in the past few years and become more comfortable with using technology. So I think the majority here was very attuned to the challenges that come with that and decided it was time for a more protective approach to privacy rights.
Vibert, what do you think? Why do you think it took until now that to find this privacy interest in IP addresses?
Well, part of it is also just, the way the law works. You have to have a case that comes to the court that raises the issue. And the last big Supreme Court case in this area was Spencer. And you mentioned that the police had to get a warrant in this case to get the subscriber information, and that's because of Spencer. The Supreme Court said that that was necessary. But in that case, the IP address was collected by the police over a peer-to-peer file sharing program. So essentially, the accused had given their IP address directly to the police in that case, and so the issue just didn't come up there. So this was the first chance that the Supreme Court has had since then to tackle the IP address itself.
So Nadine, a question that I have, and look, I'm not a privacy expert here, but like many Canadians, I get ads for things like free VPNs, and a lot of teenagers will even install VPNs on their phone or home devices, which essentially operate to hide their IP addresses. So it's very common knowledge among many Canadians that you can use something like a VPN or a proxy server or a Tor browser to hide your IP address if you want to do that. And often it's not done for nefarious purposes. It's sort of well known that your IP address is traceable to you. So to me, it sort of begs the question of if your IP address is so traceable and so easily identifiable, why would you have a privacy interest in it?
Right. And it's a great question. I think what the majority here said was basically that the IP address is a digital breadcrumb that leads the police on the trail that eventually leads them to the person's identity. Right. And so while the individual might be able to use VPN to hide their address before this decision, the police could have gone to the ISP and gotten access to the IP address because the ISP will always track your IP address regardless of whether you're using a VPN. And so it's still that they would still be able to identify the IP address associated with certain internet activity. So it might be able to shield you from some online users, but before this case, it wasn't required to get a warrant before getting access to an IP address from the ISP, which now we know has changed.
Any thoughts on that, Vibert? And maybe any thoughts on the fact that I mean, it does, as I said, I'm no privacy expert. It does strike me as a little unusual that someone committing a digital crime would not be taking efforts to hide their IP address. So any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we weren't dealing with a criminal mastermind here. That might be part of it, but we shouldn't have to go to those lengths to protect our privacy. To use an analogy, if we leave our door and our home unlocked, it would be easy for the police to go in there and poke around, but we expect that they won't do that. We expect them to refrain from invading our privacy like that. So even though we can hide our IP address from the police, we shouldn't have to. We should expect the state to respect our privacy interests. That's what the charter requires of them.
That's a really great analogy there, Vibert. Uh, so the accused in this case, he argued that the request for an IP address without a warrant, Nadine, it violated his charter right to be free from an unreasonable search. So we've only got 30 seconds, but what I want to propose to you to answer in the next segment is how was this a surge, especially if the service provider Moneris, they did voluntarily give the police this information after being asked for it. But how can you explain why that constitutes a search? We've got to go to break, but when we come back, we'll discuss that.